Welcome back, everyone, to our last session of the day. I'm introducing Nick Anderson. He is the founder of The Chosen Leader and the CEO of 8th Avenue Advisors. He's had a 25-year career in the services industry and is going to share some of his experiences with us. Another really fascinating thing is just this year he published his book, 6-Word Lessons for Middle Managers. And Nick, bring us up.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. I really liked it when the lights went out. Can we do that for dramatic effect? And then I said, Sam could turn on the smoke machine. I'll run out of the corner here, and this is the way we're closing out this conference. It's almost customary at this point where someone like me standing where I am wants to say, how are you doing? How are we doing today? And I was thinking about this, and I'm more concerned with how you're going to be doing an hour from now than I am right now. And I know I'm in between you and life. But I really am interested in how you'll be doing an hour from now, because it is my sincere intent, my sincere hope that an hour from now you will walk away with something that you can use. The art of pushing string. So you're sitting across the table from your client and you're having a conversation about conservation easements. Trying to explain to them that this is a guaranteed 100% chance of being audited. If you imagine all of the ideas that you have for clients, all of these really good ideas, like, hey, client, before you sell your business, give me a call. Hey, client, before you liquidate any asset, just give me a call. Instead of on December 30th, just give me a call. Imagine that idea as a piece of string, and it's laying on the table between you and your client. You really want them to have this idea, this piece of string. And how many times are we trying to push this idea across the table to our client? Well, the art of pushing string transfers the push into a pull. How do we get our client to pull that idea that you have for them? So right now, if you can imagine your client, your actual client, that person whom you have an idea, and perhaps it's not conservation easements, but it's something that you've learned in this conference, this idea, strategy, or maybe you're starting from this place where you're just thinking of all of your clients like, my gosh, would you just call me before you do that thing? Call me before December 31st. Maybe you have a client whose business has grown and expanded and they're doing business across state lines, and you're thinking, I really, really want them to file state and local taxes in all of the jurisdictions that they're like, this is I want that string to go, okay, so who is your client, a real client? And think of them throughout the next 47 minutes or however long we are. And what is that idea? And what are the challenges that you faced in trying to push the string across the table to that client? We're gonna go on a little journey for an hour thinking about some ideas. But before we do that, it's important, I think, for you to know who it is that's peddling these ideas. I'm pushing string right now. Okay? So who am I? Who is it that's selling these ideas to you? Well, as Sam mentioned, I'm a retired banker. I spent 25 years in the banking industry. I started when I was 17 years old. That's true. When I was about 18 or 19 years old, I made this prophetic statement. I'm only going to do this banking stuff for 25 years. And in my 40s, I'm going to retire and I'm going to go work for myself. I forgot about that for about 2 decades until earlier this year. Maybe it was late last year. And I said, it's time. It's time for me to move on. I think I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go way, way back. See, I was born in a small town. Not really. Shoreline, Washington. But I want you to know about me. And there's a reason for this, but if you'll hang out with me for the next 3 or 5 minutes, I want you to know about me. At the age of 4, I stood at the doorway of the home that I was born into, not born in, I was born in a hospital, but born into, as I watched my father leave. I didn't understand why Mom was holding me back and Dad was leaving. See, my father was both mentally ill and chemically dependent, and after years of the stuff that he was doing, my mom finally had enough and said, "You have to go." That was the first experience that I had with abandonment. And for the next 6 years, my father was a weekend dad, and my mom was the den mother, and she took me to soccer practice, and I lived a life as you might be imagining now. At the age of 10, I was at the Boys and Girls Club one weekend waiting for my dad to pick me up, and he never showed up. And that was the weekend that my father chose to end his life. And so again, I learned abandonment. Now, these things are important to what I'm going to share with you later. I also understand they're heavy, so I appreciate you staying with me. We're going to go somewhere. My mother remarried to a great man whom I call Dad, and I lived what I would classify as a normal American life. We lived in a nice home in the suburbs. I had friends at school. I fell in love with the girl next door, and kind of that tortured, like, I really like you, and she didn't, and then, every guy in here knows what I'm talking about. So at the age of 17, I get a job at the local bank as a part-time bank teller. What was very interesting is I got ready for work. I buttoned up my shirt. Hey, everybody. I buttoned up my shirt, put on my tie, walked into the bank, stood behind the counter, and unbeknownst to me, I took on this alter ego. I was no longer Nicky, the son of divorced parents. I was no longer Nick, the son of a father who'd chosen to end his life. I was no longer the kid next door that wouldn't leave the girl. I was Nick the banker. When people walk in the office and they made assumptions about who I was and how I was and what my education was. And I allowed that to happen. Embraced it. So my career at the age of 17 accelerated rather quickly. I became a personal banker at the age of 18. I became an assistant manager of a bank branch at the age of 19. And that year I was named assistant manager of the year. I became a branch manager at the age of 21. I spent some time in corporate training and development, training new hires and branch managers in sales skills and techniques. I left that bank and became the head of retail banking. So I oversaw branch managers and the head of marketing, and then transitioned from there to become the head of commercial payments for a regional bank. And I was managing sales teams up and down the West Coast. And I literally wrote the books on sales for Bank of America. I co-authored a sales manual that was used nationally for the bank that I was a head of retail banking. I wrote what I called the SMART sales manual. SMART was an acronym. It was sales management, activities, resources, and tools for selling. So I wrote the book on sales and financial services. Right? Transitioned from commercial payments into commercial lending, and transitioned out of a role of being a leader and a sales manager into a role of being an individual contributor, a salesperson, because I'd been preaching for years. And I said, I want to go practice what I preach. My kids were young at the time. I wanted a lifestyle that was more golf and less spreadsheets. So I became a sales guy. And I was good at it. Within a couple of years, I was the one of the top contributing, highest producing salespeople in this bank. My career is continuing on this trajectory. I'm invited into some leadership training out of state for the bank at headquarters. And I come home late on a Thursday evening. My wife and I had a tradition. We would take a walk in our neighborhood. And we were walking in the evening. She was hit by a car. And she didn't survive. So I'm now faced with myriad decisions in my life. This is early 2016. I had been individual contributor, salesperson. In fact, my boss just weeks before said, hey, we'd really like you to take over the leadership of this group. And I said, no, I'm not interested. He came back again some weeks later and said, hey, are you interested now? And I said, yeah, I got to do that. The bank that I was working for acquired another bank. We merged them in, and then immediately after it was acquired, and things were just wild. We were losing employees, losing customers. The executives of the bank said, Nick, we really, really need you to help hold things together. I want you to take over this group, be responsible. So in the end, I was responsible for a book of business that was $350 million in assets under management. And they said, Nick, how much of that can you retain through this transition, through the acquisition, through the system conversion, et cetera? I said, we'll keep all of it if you give me everything I ask for. And they said, okay. And this was retention bonuses and pricing authority and everything that it takes to keep bankers and keep clients. And 3 years later, that $350 million book of business had grown into a $500 million book of business. And 3 years later, I said to my boss, I said, okay, we had a deal. I did what I said I would. You held up your end of the bargain. Now it's time to lay me off. Because that was really the end of my career. I was done. Because I knew then and I know now, I am crystal clear on what my purpose is in this world. And that is to help other people realize and live into their potential. And I did that for a long time as a banker, as an advisor to entrepreneurs and to business leaders and CFOs. I spent the better part of a decade as a subject matter expert in nonprofit finance and worked with a lot of notable organizations. And then the staff that I would manage and lead and grow. But I wanted to do that on my own. I knew I needed to do that on my own. So that's what I do today. I advise entrepreneurs and business owners. As Sam mentioned, I wrote a book, and the title is interesting, 6-word lessons for middle managers. That's where I spent the better part of 2 decades of my career. And I coach one-on-one, executives, leaders, salespeople, and I love my life. And I love being here. Thank you for allowing me to introduce myself at that level of depth. I think it's important, as I'm about to push some string at you, that you know who it is that's representing these ideas. So let's go back to your client, the idea, and you think about the challenges that you faced as you're trying to convince your client, yeah, you really should be reporting your sales in California. I know that they want to know about all the activity of all the LLCs, all the way up the chain, fine. But it's the right thing to do, isn't it? Hang out with me on that one. Okay, you've got your client, you've got your idea, you've got your string. We're going to approach this looking at 3 different topics from 3 different authors over time, 3 of the greatest minds, in my opinion, I think in others' opinions. We're going to look at influence, we're going to look at being great, we're going to look at why. Influence comes from Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. The notion of being great comes from Jim Collins' Good to Great, and why, who knows where why comes from? Anybody? Simon Sinek and his TED Talk delivered in Bremerton, Washington. Who knew that was done in Bremerton? I didn't know that. But now you know that. So, influence. Carnegie encourages us to encourage others, to offer praise over criticism. So how does this show up when you're working with clients? If we're thinking about the idea of getting your client to call you before they liquidate an asset, or at least while whatever it is they're selling is on the market, or at least before, December 25th, can we get December 20th? Any takers? How do we encourage them to do that? So one thing that we might do is say to a client, I really hate it when people tell me on December 31st that they had this big transaction throughout the year. And so maybe we indirectly criticize, or we criticize someone else as we're showing up to a client. Carnegie would say, no, don't do that. Praise. And so offer an example of a client that you've worked with that has done something the way that you want it done, and use that as an example with your client. Encourage your clients to open up dialogue. Encourage them to engage with you. And here's one that I use pretty much on a daily basis. Disagree gently. I've invited a lot of feedback into my life. There are people whom I trust and admire and look up to, and I say, please, give me feedback. And sometimes it hurts, as I'm trying to grow and I'm trying to get better. But I've learned that the best response to anything that someone has to offer is 2 words. Who knows what they are? Thank you. Thank you. This is the best way to respond to anything that a client says that is an objection. Joe, you've got this operation down in California. Your sales are growing. I'd really like you to report the sales in California and pay taxes. You know what? I don't want to deal with that. They can come after me. How many times have you heard this? I don't want to pay those taxes. I'll deal with it when they come after me, right? Well, if your response is, well, thanks for telling me how you really feel. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really want to encourage you to be open with me. And there's some other things that we might talk about down the road. But if you respond to that criticism or that disagreement with thank you, you're not shutting them down. They're not shutting you down. You're not in this place of disagreement back and forth. It's going to help. Carnegie encourages us to be happy in the company of those that we're working with, encouraging them to talk and listening intently. So I offer this: stop trying to make yourself or the idea, the data, the plan, the whatever it is, stop trying to make that important, and instead make your client important in the context of whatever that is. Listening can be challenging. Now, in this context right now, this is pretty much a one-way thing. But I wonder, how comfortable are we in silence? That was not awkward for me. Just kidding. I'm standing in front of all of you, and there's, I don't know how many 120 people online. Hi. One-on-one across the desk from a client, how comfortable are you asking the question and then leaving the room silent until they answer? Leaving that space for them to fill and listening intently. So as Carnegie is encouraging us to be encouraging, to offer praise, to listen intently, the purpose of his encouragement is so that we will have influence with our clients in their lives and their decision making. Now, who's heard of Socrates? Excellent. And if you haven't heard of Socrates, have you heard of the Socratic method? Is the Socratic method is one where you ask questions, right? And then as you're asking questions, we're trying to get a yes answer. Is that correct? No? I don't know. I'm seeing some faces. What do we think? Is the Socratic method one that is leading yes or no? Following with me? Getting there? So the Socratic method, a spirit of inquiry, Socrates is said to have opened up with some yes questions like I did. And then we got to this place of, do we understand? And there was a pause. So now we've got some opportunity for understanding. And so if I go back to that moment where I said that the Socratic method is one where we lead with questions, do you understand what I was getting at with leading questions? Are you seeing what I'm trying to do here? Okay. All right. Y'all are like, okay, Nick, move on. I get it. Because you read the third bullet point, didn't you? Whatever. I should have made it one of those fancy ones that like, yeah, okay. Moving on. Actually, just kidding. So being great is coming next, but before we get there, influence. I want to hang out here. So you show up encouraging, you show up positive, you listen, you get your clients to open up, and then you ask questions to really understand what it is that's driving them, where their objections might be coming from. When those objections come up, you say thank you. This is opening up the opportunity for us to have influence. Okay, now we're going to transition into being great. Greatness requires some passion. Are you passionate about the work that you do? I mean, come on. Yes. What are you passionate about? Who's got an idea?
Helping businesses grow.
Helping businesses grow. Traveling. Yeah. What other areas are you passionate about your business, about your work, about what you do? If there's anybody online that wants to put something in the chat about what you're passionate about, why did you get into this line of work? What drew you here? The belief that I help clients sleep at night, that came from somebody online. Okay, we're helping people protect assets, preserve assets, grow their business, do so smartly. Like these are things that it's actually helping solve problems. Another answer online. These are actually things. It's okay to be passionate if you're a CPA. I'm not going to tell anybody. Your secret is safe with me. It's okay. All right. So I've got a question. Let's take this to another level of discomfort. Who's the best CPA? Not in the room. Who's the one that you admire the most? Think of that person. If they're in the room sitting next to you and you want to call them out, that would be awesome. If you're online, who's the best in the world? When I ask that question, who's the best CPA in the world? Who comes to mind? Who's got an answer? Kel Rayburn. Kel Rayburn. Does anybody know Kel? Tom Neal. You know Kel. Tom Neal. Mark Hugh. Greg White. Look, there's names coming out here. This is great. Anybody in the room got a? Ed Sollers. Brian Avery. Greg White. So, the best in the world. If we think about what does that person do? What makes them the best? And for those of you that didn't offer an answer, I know you've got somebody in mind. What do they do? What makes them the best? Now we think about what does it take for me today to be like that person who I'm imagining? Can I wake up in the morning and be as good as Greg White? whatever area it is that Greg is the best at. Maybe, maybe not. Jim Collins suggests in Good to Great that getting to greatness occurs over a series of tiny incremental pushes, even subconsciously. Just the notion of saying, okay, I want to be the best in the world. I want to be great, like Greg White. His is the name that I remember after all these names. So Greg, wherever you're at, I'm going to get there just because I've been imagining. Now, I shared some of my personal life story with you. I shared with you these experiences of abandonment in my life. I'm going to share with you how that showed up later. It showed up in the form of my own need to be the best. See, I had this belief that if I wasn't the best, that the people around me, the people close to me, the people that I loved and admired, they would leave. And I know where this comes from. This comes from the experience of the 10-year-old me that asked the question, the impossible question of, why wasn't I good enough for my father to choose to stay alive? And without being able to ask that question or have that question answered, I just decided that I was always going to be the best. The other thing that I learned as a young boy that manifested later in life was really how to win friends and influence people. Here again, because of my life experience and the fears, these things that psychiatrists, psychologists would say lived in my shadow. Here are these things that I didn't want to acknowledge or admit about myself. The fears of abandonment, they came about in this desire, this need to connect with people, to know and understand, and then to always be the best. Well, how did that show up in my career? When people would come into the bank, I would make connections. I would be friendly. I would engage. And as we would enter into conversations, then I would be inspired to be great, to be the best. And so clients in the bank began to trust me, and they would buy from me. There's more to being great than just wanting to be great. And this showed up in the chat from some of our online participants, this notion of discipline. Now, I'm going to highlight a man who I think exemplifies rigorous discipline in client relationships better than anyone. His name is Mike Spino, and he works for Edward Jones. And as a brand, Edward Jones, I think, it's average. But as a financial advisor, Mike Spino is beyond average. So I first met Mike about 20 years ago. And in our initial, hi, how are you? I'm Nick. I'm Mike. He says, Nick, how often would you like me to contact you? And I said, I don't know, probably twice a year, once around my birthday. It's late August, kind of the end of the year. And once around tax time, maybe April 1st, in case I'm going to make an IRA contribution. That seems about right. For nearly 20 years, I get 2 phone calls for sure every year from Mike Spino. Hey, Nick, it's Mike. Just checking in. Happy birthday. How you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? Hey, Nick, it's April 1st. Just checking in. Is there anything I can help you with? Now, I get some calls sporadically in between, but those you can set your watch by these. That level of discipline. Now, certainly he uses a CRM system. Absolutely. He keeps notes because when he calls, he says, last time we talked, you said this and this and this. And there's no way you remember that. But he has the discipline in the system. So what happens here? When I think of anything having to do with investments or my portfolio, who's the first person I think of? Like we've got the answer to this. It's interesting that Collins, in his book, Good to Great, also gives a nod to Socrates. And this is in the context of leadership. He encourages leaders to show up as Socratic moderators, to ask questions, and even to ask some challenging questions, not just the leading questions, but challenging questions to uncover opportunities from a team in the context of leadership. But if we apply this to our clients, asking questions to uncover some opportunities, to uncover some fears, to uncover some of the objections, we want to do that. I first learned and applied this notion of asking questions as a bank teller, and then took that to some of the sales curriculum that I wrote, which is asking questions of clients in a way that was approachable and open, but definitely targeted. Definitely targeted. So can you imagine for yourself that client, that issue, how often do you reach out to them to engage? How often do you do so energetically, encouragingly, with praise? Think about Mike Spino calling, hey, happy birthday. And then ask a question. Is there anything that might be happening in the next 3 or 6 months with your company or with anything that you might want to let me know about? Imagine if you had that level of discipline, if you asked those questions of your clients, would you ever end up, not ever, but what's the likelihood that you end up on December 31st or even April 14th learning about what happened, right? So Collins gives us the example of a level 5 leader. And I'm going to spin this just a little bit and bring it into the context of a level 5 financial professional. The language still fits, but let's start at level 1. Level 1 is the highly capable individual. This is the person who makes productive contributions through talent, knowledge, skills, and good work habits. No question in my mind that everybody in this room and everybody online can check that box. But as we go up in the hierarchy and as we aspire to be, I'll say level 4 or level 5, let's ask these questions of ourselves. Level 3, the competent manager organizes people and resources towards the effective and efficient pursuit of predetermined objectives. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like when I contacted my CPA and said, hey, I'm going to be opening up a couple of LLCs. I've got this brand now, this Chosen Leader brand, and I'm looking at doing some other things. I'm going to need some help. Alex brought in a business tax professional, organized, right? Brought around. What's level 4? The effective leader, maybe the effective financial professional, catalyzes commitment to and vigorous pursuit of. We're getting to that place where, as an effective leader, you're getting your client to pull on string. And level 5, building enduring greatness through a paradoxical combination of personal humility plus professional will. So what does that look like? Personal humility and professional will. So we're thinking about our client with whatever problem it is that we want to solve for them, and we present the idea. We lay the string on the table. And we do so with humility. We've asked some questions, we've uncovered some opportunities, and we lay it out there. And they say, yeah, I'll wait till they come after me. I don't want to pay those California taxes. So the professional Will says, okay, thank you for saying that. Thank you for telling me. You know, I'm not going to let go of this idea. I understand you're not ready right now. Maybe you ask permission. Is it okay if I check back with you in 3 months and see how things are going? Sales have increased. Maybe you want to reconsider. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just make a note in your own CRM system. But that rigorous discipline, that will that says, I know this is the right thing. I know this needs to be done. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to continue. I will persist until I find a way that convinces this client that whatever that idea is, they need to pull on that string. So here again, and we started from a place of imagining who that client is, imagining what that idea is that you really want them to pull on. Who is that client? What is that idea? How might you present it? And how might you continue to follow up? How might you continue to stay on top of this idea? You pause for just a moment, check in. Do we have any questions so far about anything that I've said? Or perhaps any feedback so far? Anything that I've offered as an idea, you think, there's no way I can do that. Good. We're all on board. This is great. Let's unpack the idea of why.
I've got something.
Oh, please.
You're using an example of maybe something the client would consider taking.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a positive thing that they should do and they want to, they're just not motivated to do it.
Okay.
I think, sometimes when you give that example, I'm like, I don't get too carried about California myself, so I wouldn't really be pushing that string anyway.
Okay.
But a lot of times it's, I want to do, update my estate plan or something like that. They know they're just resistant because they're busy and they know it's important, but it's not that urgent.
Yeah.
I think that's the.
So for those that, in the back and online, Randy says the example that I'm using shows up as maybe something as a negative, not a positive, or maybe it's something that Randy, or maybe some of you all just think, I'm not going to push that particular issue. But there's another one around estate planning, or another idea that the client actually wants to do or agrees is a good idea, but they don't take action on. Am I hearing that? Okay.
I think we deal with that a lot more than we do.
Okay. And from your perspective, is there a difference? I have an answer to this, but is there a difference in how you approach that with your client?
Yeah, because I'm a lot more motivated by the one. I see it's so important to them.
This is okay. So if we go back, I won't skip through all the sites, but there's some passion that you have. I mean, I can hear it right now. I can see it that estate planning in particular, any planning, there's some passion around that. And so you're motivated to go back to that. Okay. The fact that you're showing up with this energy tells me on some level that's probably going to resolve itself because you're going to show up. But where's the challenge here? Is it that clients just don't take the action even though they?
It's going to be work.
It's going to be work, and they have other things to do.
Running their business or.
Yeah. So when I lost my wife, I put a call into my friends at Helen Varon, and I said, I want to have a meeting in your boardroom with Mike Spino and my attorney and you all, right? That kind of is that kind of action what you want to see from a client that you're not seeing? Or is there something else there?
You're talking about something where there's an event that made it necessary.
Right.
These things are things we can get to.
Okay. Right. So there is a story here that I just gave you that goes back to Carnegie's praise over criticism, encouragement. And if you can think of that story to share with your client that really hits home, and maybe you need 2, maybe you need 3, maybe you need to go back to it and say, Randy, I just heard this guy speak, and he went through something that you couldn't imagine. And if he hadn't done what I'm recommending you do, maybe that's going to be a part of the solution. But I'm suggesting that before you even get there, putting yourself in the position of having influence with your client because you show up encouraging, you show up with positivity, you're there, you're building that relationship. You also have that rigorous discipline around showing up and continuing to follow through. And then you show up with subject matter expertise and you present the ideas. All of these things come together. They all come together. And they're also brought together with this notion of why. So Simon Sinek suggests that people have a deep-seated need to belong and to have purpose. And this might be the catalyst that gets those clients to act. It might be belonging, but I would suggest purpose is the real driver. And how many of your clients have a legacy plan or need that legacy plan because they have children, they have the next generation? What is their purpose? What is that thing that is more important to them than anything? What is their purpose? And you'll get to that place through this questioning and inquiry, Socratic method of understanding what it is that's important to them. Your key customers, according to Sinek, are the innovators and early adapters. So as you suggest, hey, it's really important that you do this plan, and they jump right on board. What is it about them that you can find in other clients? The innovators and early adapters. So in terms of purpose, Sinek offers the story of 2 stonemasons. You see 2 stonemasons working tirelessly out in the sun. They're carving stone, and you approach the first one and you ask about his work. And he says, I work long and hard every day. I'm carving these stones, and they're going to build this structure that I may never see. My work, it's labor that I don't know if it has any purpose. I don't know if it has any meaning. And you approach the second stonemason who's energetically carving the stone and says, I'm working to build something that I know I'll never see, but future generations are going to enjoy. That shift in perspective, perhaps that's what you can draw from your client or touch into. What's really interesting as we explore the notion of why, and even going back to Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I have a 16-year-old son, and I encourage him to read this book. And he says, yeah, I can't buy into that, Dad. That's all just manipulation. He's a cynical 16-year-old. Yeah. But there is actually a fine line here between influence and manipulation. What is it that makes the difference? Is it intent? Is it altruism? Perhaps. In sales and marketing, a lot of the manipulation shows up as 50% off, hurry up and buy now, click here. We see this stuff on social media all the time. Buy now, click here. Was $4.97, now it's $23. Right? Those are tricks and gimmicks to get us to buy, but influence is different. And Sinek encourages us, yes. Sincerity. So the statement here is the difference between manipulation and influence is sincerity. I agree entirely. Do you all agree? Yeah? Got nodding heads, right? If we go back to one of the earlier questions that I asked about why are you passionate about your work, you said things that were very honorable. I help people save money. I help people sleep at night, came from one of our online participants. We're growing businesses. We're protecting assets. I think the work that you do comes from actually a noble place. And you are sincere in this. In fact, in the financial services space, I think that you all are very highly regarded financial professionals. Your clients often come to you with problems that you can help them solve because they trust you. What we're trying to get them to do is do that before April 14th or January 1st, or before they needed the plan. We want them to act on it sooner. So we're already coming from a place where we've got trust and we have some influence. And if we build on that and take it to the next level, perhaps we could get them to do that thing that they're going to do on a timeline that will help them more. Sinek encourages us to know our own why. I asked the question of you when we began, what are you passionate about here, just to kind of scratch and uncover some of that. Perhaps you've already made the connection as I went through my own introduction. It was intentional. I shared with you about me so that you would know my why on some level. I opened up with you about my life and my experience so we could get to this place where perhaps as I lay the string out on the table, there's some trust, there's some influence. I shared with you bits of my professional career in an effort to demonstrate or display some credibility. So that was thoughtful, that was intentional. How many of you saw this on Simon Sinek's TED Talk, or have you seen it in the book-ish? Okay. I think in the financial services space, we are collectively very good at explaining what we do. Very, very good at explaining what we do. I think we're pretty okay at explaining how we do it. And by pretty okay, that doesn't mean that you can't explain it. It's that when you get to this part of explaining how you do what you do, clients' eyes kind of gloss over and it's like, well, lost them. But I think the greatest opportunity is in explaining why we do what we do. And I wonder, Randy, as you're talking with clients about the plan, how often that conversation is focused on the plan, the what, or the how it gets done, because perhaps we're concerned that they have a business to run, they have other things to do, and we want to make that easy for them. You know, it's not that hard. Here's how we can do this. Maybe the opportunity is in the why. maybe the opportunity is in the why. So, over the course of the last 50 minutes, we've gone on a bit of a journey. We started in this place of imagining a client, your real client, your actual client, and you have an idea. You've got that string that you're going to put on the table. You want to push that string across. In fact, you want them to pull on that string. And the challenge is they've got a business to run. They've got other things to do. They're going to do it, just not yet. Now, because I've been rehearsing this for days, I'm going to go back to this out-of-state tax thing. I don't have a so I'm pointing to you, Randy, because you gave me the new one. I know. Maybe somebody online does. But really, with that in mind, what I was going to say is, imagine 3 years into the future, your client calls and says, I'm selling my business. I'm going to sell my business. It's June 1st. I'm going to sell my business. And I'm so thankful that 3 years ago, you didn't let up on me filing out-of-state taxes, because when I went through the due diligence with the buyer, they wanted all of those records. And if I hadn't reported that, there would have been a massive liability that would have reduced the multiples on the sale of my business. So thanks for sticking with me. You either saved or made me a bunch of money. So I'm not going to use that example. What I'm going to use is, Randy, I didn't know what was going to happen in my life. I was young. I was 35. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a will. I didn't need a will. In fact, my wife stopped working about 6 months before, and because she didn't have an income, and because of where I was at, just in my own life and in my mind, said we actually don't need to pay for life insurance anymore, because it's on me. I got this. Maybe if I would have taken the action, maybe if it would have been recommended, maybe if somebody would have said, hey, Nick, happy birthday. By the way, do you have an estate plan? Do you know what you're doing around that? No, you don't? Listen, buddy, I really care about you. I just heard this story about this guy. I'm not going to let that happen to you. I actually want you to come into my office next week. I really want you to do that. And I'm not going to let go. Maybe. So as you go back to your office tomorrow, maybe not. No. Is it a CPA holiday? Like it's a bank holiday? Does that work for y'all? I get some yes, no. Yeah, no. Yes, no. Maybe it's Monday. I hope that our hour together, your hour with me, my hour with you, has given you maybe just one thing as you think about that one client and that one idea that you might just try one time over and over and over again, because you've got the discipline, you've got the passion, and you think about, how is it that I can gain greater influence with my clients? How can I show up, as Carnegie says, to win friends and influence people? Because that's where we start. What am I doing every day to be the best, to be great? You're here. And that demonstrates your commitment to continuing professional education. And because you have to, your passion for charitable easements is shining through. But you're here. You're learning to be great. And what do you know about your why? Where's your passion in the work that you do? What are the things that you might share with your client that helps them to understand you're sincere? Because I think you are. So when I left banking and created the brand Chosen Leader, the brand was born from a leadership sermon delivered by a mentor of mine. Bill Robinson was the son of a Southern Baptist preacher. And so when I say leadership sermon, I mean sermon. And he would stand on stage and he would deliver this leadership sermon over and over again. I saw him do it many, many times. And in that, he would say, leadership is a choice. He'd say it 3 times. Leadership is a choice. And the third time, he would say, leadership is a choice. Now, I thought I understood what Bill was saying. I thought that the choice to lead was the choice of the leader, the person who wanted to lead in the choices that they would make. And I was kind of right. I kind of understood. But as I went on to examine and study the ideas of leadership and look at what made someone a leader and how did they interact with the constituencies, and I read books and I watched, I began to see that leadership really is a choice, but it's not the choice of the leader necessarily. In fact, leadership is the choice of the follower. So John Maxwell is one of the most brilliant minds in leadership, and he would say that if you think you're leading but no one's following, well, you're just taking a walk. Leadership occurs in that moment when one person chooses to follow another. And so that is where the brand Chosen Leader was born. It's my study, my examination of what does it take for someone to be chosen by another? What is it that inspires someone to choose to follow another? And in the context of your work with clients, as you lay that idea on the table, you lay out the string, it's the same thing. What is it that will inspire your client to grab a hold of that idea and pull it across the table? It's the connections that you build with them. It's the influence that you have. It's your competence, your subject matter expertise. And then there's something there that connects us as humans, and it's that sincere why. So thank you for sharing this hour with me. And as you go back and engage with your clients, I sincerely hope that they make the choice to grab onto that string, whatever the idea is. Thank you.